And thank you all to those who have completed the poll question there. But we'll go ahead and wrap up this poll, and we'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. So again, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you all for joining for today's grant solicitation webinar, the OJJDP FY 2020 Opioid Affected Youth Initiative Solicitation. My name is William Moore, and I am with OJJDP's National Training and Technical Assistance Center. And as your technical host, I would like to go over just a few technical related features in the Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements to keep in mind. Please note that this event is being recorded, and our webinar will be linked to our YouTube page. Please note that you can view our YouTube page by selecting the link that is on this particular page. Here you will see our archived webinars on our YouTube page. If you would like the transcript or any supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of important documents and resources related to today's webinar, including the FAQ that will help troubleshoot any issues that you may have, you may do so, or even the PowerPoint presentation for today's grant solicitation, then you may do so by going to the Handouts pod, selecting the name of the file, and then selecting the download button. And let me restore this. Kathy, just FYI, the maximizing of the PowerPoint in the presenter area will, or the participant area affects the audience, but no worries. I'll type you in the presenter chat in a little bit. No worries, Kathy. So for the next portion here is the chat box. I wanted you all to note that if you have any questions for our presenter, because at the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session where the presenter will address in some of the questions that you all posed during the presentation. You can simply type your question into the chat box as they arise. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. Now, if you're viewing alone, there's no need to type anything at this time. However, if you're viewing in a group, go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. Again, if you're viewing alone, there's no need to type anything at this time. However, for those individuals who are viewing in a group, please type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you're viewing alone, there's no need to type anything at this time. Again, thank you all for joining us for today's presentation. I will now turn the presentation over to our moderator and presenter, Ms. Kathy Mitchell, for today's webinar. Kathy, take it away.
Thanks, William. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new applicant webinar for the FY20 Opioid Affected Youth Initiative. Everyone on the call today is probably a potential applicant, or maybe you've already begun completing your application, or maybe you're just curious about the nature of the program. So hopefully the presentation will be able to answer some of those questions that you have. We'll be going over the program itself, talking a little bit about the goals and objectives, eligibility requirements, priority considerations, some of which are new this year, and the application process, just some basic components of what your application should include. So as a reference, as we go through the announcement, you can follow along through the solicitation by using this link here. We want to make everyone aware that the deadline for submitting the application is April 20th. So this is a 3-year grant program. It supports states, communities, tribal jurisdictions, also nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, colleges, and universities as they implement programs and strategies that help kids, youth, and families who are impacted by opioids. So the goal is to provide services to youth and families impacted by opioid addiction, and some of the objectives include implementing prevention, intervention, and treatment programs that address the needs of pregnant women, postpartum women, parents, and youth, all in an effort to implement integrated services for these populations through treatment and recovery, and also supporting the juvenile and criminal justice systems to help address the needs of kids and youth who are impacted by this epidemic. We expect to make up to 13 awards. The maximum dollar amount for each award will be $750,000, but it will be a range this year. Some awards will be for $500,000 all the way up to $750,000 based upon the nature of the project that you're implementing. The period of performance will begin on October 1st. It's for 30 months. And we will make the awards in the form of a grant as opposed to a cooperative agreement. So in terms of eligibility, our eligibility has widened a little bit this year as opposed to previous funding years. So eligible applicants include states and territories, units of local government, federally recognized Indian tribal governments, nonprofit organizations, as well as for-profit organizations. Under this solicitation, only one application by any particular applicant will be considered, and those eligible applicants that propose to provide direct services to youth must not include youth who are age 18 or older in the population they will serve. So here are the priority considerations. We introduced priority considerations last fiscal year. They are again with us this federal funding cycle, and we've also expanded what we consider to be a priority to include a couple of more tidbits. So I'll go over each one individually. The first priority consideration addresses specific challenges that rural communities face. This means that your proposal within your narrative section will need to talk about the type of community that you belong to and the demographic that you'll be serving under this project. If it is a rural community, and if these funds will be utilized in order to uplift or improve that community, then we certainly want you to document that in very specific terms, because that would be a priority consideration. The next item are those applications that demonstrate that the individuals who are intended to benefit from this funding reside in high poverty areas or persistent poverty counties. So you'll want to demonstrate that either your locality or the locality that you'll be serving with this funding will be used to benefit those who reside in high poverty areas. The last priority consideration is what we call QOZ, Qualified Opportunity Zones. This was also a consideration last fiscal year. So those of you who applied for funding in 2019 may be familiar with QOZs. And so you'll want to demonstrate in your narrative how the locations within your demographic, that they are designated qualified opportunity zones, and that this funding would impact positively those areas. So in the solicitation, just a quick message about, I guess I'll go back to the slide, a quick message about these considerations. In the solicitation, you'll be able to find detailed guidance about each solicitation, each consideration, and how they might apply to the program that you're proposing. So performance measures. Goals, objectives, and deliverables are directly related to performance measures that demonstrate the results of the work completed. Performance measures come into play after you've been awarded. It's part of your federal reporting requirement. Each quarter, award recipients are required to report on the numbers, how they've impacted the community, have they put on any sort of training, any youth who've been who've gone through the program, any youth that have reoffended since being in the program. It's just capturing all of the numbers and all of the data that's coming as a result of the program that you're implementing. And there's a link on the screen so you can see a list of the performance measures pertaining to this particular announcement. All of the measures may not apply. It's typical that they won't apply, so you'll want to select the ones that are most specific to the program that you're implementing. And of course, this is after you've been awarded. So on the screen is a link to a complete list of performance measures for this particular solicitation. And you can also find this link within the solicitation document itself. The application process file names. OJP strongly recommends that applicants use appropriately descriptive file names whenever they're submitting the components of their application. For example, program narrative, budget detail worksheet. Essentially, you just want to call it what it is. So the reason why this is important is because when we receive the application, we don't receive it as one huge file. We receive it as various files that make up a huge document. And so as we are reviewing the proposal, and we review it from several different angles, we review it from a programmatic standpoint where we are reading the narrative, we're reading the logic models, we're reading the key staff and personnel listings, and then there's a really extensive budget review process that takes place where we're looking at the budget, we're reading all of the disclosure forms, and so it's just easier if when we see a long list of files, we know this is the program narrative, this is the budget detail worksheet, this is the disclosure of lobbying forms, so we don't have to figure it out. You'd be surprised that a lot of the file names may not be labeled what they are. A lot of grantees or potential applicants, they will label it something that makes sense to their internal structure, but it wouldn't make sense to federal grant makers. So call it the narrative, call it the budget detail worksheet. The same labels that we refer to within the solicitation are the same file names that you want to keep consistently throughout this process. So preparing your budget. Applicants are encouraged to identify any training and technical assistance needs associated with their proposed projects and build in those required experts, those required trainings, whatever you think that you might need to help your project be successful. And I'll just mention that This is different from the initiative that we put together the last 2 years, where there was a built-in training and technical assistance component. It was already factored into the project. This initiative, we don't have a built-in training and TA component, and so we're kind of putting it back in the hands of the applicants to tell us what they might need in terms of training and technical assistance. So you want to really sit down and think through, do we need an expert evaluator? Do we need someone to help us with our data collection? Do we need someone to come in and train law enforcement or train our caseworkers? Really think about what types of training and technical expertise you'll need, and then estimate what those costs might be and factor that into your budget. So the budget detail worksheet. We have a standard budget detail worksheet. It's not mandatory that you use our budget detail worksheet form, but it's pretty, I would strongly, strongly encourage you to use it. It's found on this link that you have in your screen. And sometimes if an applicant chooses not to use our budget form, whatever method you choose to submit your budget, just make sure that it has all of the required budget fields. All of the fields that we're going to be looking for are inclusive in your version of the form, and that it's easy to read and easy to follow. The risk that you play in not using our form is that the budget goes through several types of review here, and any one of those individuals from any one of those divisions at any time might say, this is a really difficult form for me to decipher, and I just am having a difficult time. The applicant will just have to do it over. So to alleviate the potential for having to redo the budget on the standardized budget form, I strongly encourage folks to utilize the link in the solicitation so that you can use the budget detail worksheet form that was created by the Office of Justice Programs. That way you spare yourself any sort of risk of having to redo and recomplete a whole new budget form. So the budget preparation and submission information section of the OJP Grant Application Resource Guide has a lot of details. It kind of walks you through the budget detail worksheet. You can also look at the DOJ Financial Guide. That also talks a lot about how to put together the budget detail worksheet, what each field means, why it's required, what you might want to think about when you're putting together your budget. It's just really, really a helpful guide. And so the application resource guide can be accessed through the link on your screen. If you would like to find out how to look through the DOJ financial guide, I would encourage you to call the resource hotline. It's listed at the top of the solicitation, and just call them and ask them if they can point you to where you can locate the DOJ financial guide for that budget assistance. And so these are just some building blocks to help you remember all of the necessary components that you want to include so that your application can be complete and fully competitive. You obviously want your cover sheet, the SF-424, the abstract, the narrative, the budget, and then we go on to the indirect cost rate agreement. If you are choosing that as an election, you certainly want to include the most current rate that you have. Your tribal authorization if you are a tribal grantee, federal management form, the lobbying form, and then you want to disclose whether or not you have any pending applications at the time of submission, and then lastly, the DOJ high-risk forms. If you're a high-risk grantee, you'll want to include that disclosure. So here are just some helpful resources. Funding details, you can click on the link for that. That gives you all of the information that pertains to this particular announcement. And the next link is the solicitation itself. After that, you have answers to frequently asked questions. And then lastly is the OJP Grant Funding Resource Guide. That's going to be sort of like a one-stop shop of how to be competitive, how to put together your proposal, what to expect after you submit your proposal, and some other basic questions that you may have. So this is just our social media platform. We are on all of the social media platforms out there. I always recommend that people who are interested in our funding opportunities, or if you are already a current grantee, these are some great avenues to hear up-to-date information. Sometimes you might get up-to-date information quicker than if you would just to go to our traditional website. They may tweet about a new funding announcement, events that we're hosting, webinars, publications that we're producing, and so we invite you to follow us along on our social media channels. And so at this time, we can turn it over to our Q&A section if you all have any questions. So, William, should I be looking at the audience? I guess I'll look at the audience questions.
Yes.
So I'll start from the top. If youth under 18 are only eligible for services, does that mean if a youth turns 18 during the time they are being served, would you have them stop providing services? No. If they are already providing services at the time of their birthday, you can continue providing services until the duration of your programming. We would like to apply on behalf of 2 counties within the same state. One is urban qualified and the other is rural qualified. Is this acceptable? So I don't know who we is. It would probably be helpful to know who's asking the question, but if you are a state government, local government, depending on what, so here's the way I'll answer the question. If you, the person who is applying on behalf of the 2 counties, if you are an eligible entity, you can certainly apply on behalf of those individuals. Just know, though, that you would be the face of the grant. They may be the organizational unit, which means they'll be doing the work. They'll be completing the goals and objectives, but you would have the fiduciary responsibility for those grants as the legal signer. So they'll be doing the work, but it doesn't preclude you from the federal responsibility for auditing purposes. Next question. What age is considered youth for this initiative? Youth is, I think we went over in one of the slides under eligibility, anywhere from birth to 18 is considered youth. And also remember that this initiative is for family, youth, and children, so it doesn't preclude providing services to the parents, the caregivers who are connected to or suffering from opioid addiction. And so I hope I've answered your question. If I haven't, I would refer you to the solicitation because it spells out pretty explicitly the age range. Next question, is the link provided a few slides back? of the performance measures relative to each priority available, or can you post it here? So the performance measures are for metrics for once you get awarded. They're metrics that you'll have to report on so that we can capture those numbers. The priority considerations are completely different from performance measures, if I'm understanding your question. So on the solicitation, you can find a link to the performance measures, which is really something that after you get awarded, you want to be mindful of. The priority considerations is what you really want to be familiar with as an applicant. So the performance measures are for once you are a grantee. The priority considerations are for when you're in your application phase, and both of those are linked separately and individually in the solicitation. And that you will find the relevant links to those in this presentation as well. I don't think I linked to the priority considerations in this presentation, but I did link to the performance measures in this presentation. Hope that answers your question. Next question. When determining whether a consensus tract is designated as a high poverty area, should we be looking at the poverty data, overall population, pertaining to the target population, for example? So this is what I'll say to that, because I think that's a very granular kind of question. So there are two ways I'll answer the question. This is going to be peer reviewed, right? So the peer reviewers, who are comprised of a body of your peers, so these are juvenile justice experts, these are people who have had a long-standing career in dealing with trauma and substance abuse issues. Law enforcement professionals, like our peer reviewers, come from a variety of different backgrounds, but they all touch the juvenile justice system in some capacity. It's going to be up to their discretion. Some of them may want to see the very granular, specific details of how you determine that this is a high poverty area. And some of them, quite frankly, are just going to be more concerned with how are you building your narrative? How are you building your application? How have you conducted your needs assessment? And if you believe, based upon either census data or based upon poverty levels, however you've made that determination, how are you now going to utilize federal funds to assist this population? So it's really going to be at the discretion of the reviewer, depending upon where they put their emphasis. I always tend to lean on create a strong narrative. Create a strong narrative that really talks about what the problem is and how you're going to solve the problem in a really meaningful and impactful way. You certainly want to substantiate that with data, and you want that data to be good, accurate, and consistent. Is the youth reference for adolescents under 18? I don't know what TAY means. Adolescents under the age of 18 or up to the age of 24. So I'll refer you back to the solicitation. It's very explicit in the solicitation. And if you have questions, you can contact our Question Resource Center for any sort of age-related questions and clarification. Is there a limit on what percentage of the total amount requested can be for training? That's an excellent question. There is no limit. You want it to be sensible. So when we review the budget, one of the things that we're going to be looking at is how much did this person factor in for TA? You certainly don't want the cost for TA to be much more than the cost for services for youth and families addicted to opioids. So it's going to really be based upon what your needs are going to be in the areas of training and technical assistance, and you just want to have a nice figure, and just as long as you can substantiate why we need this training and that you can explain and justify all of the costs. But we have no we're not prescriptive in terms of the limitations there. Is it necessary to have an evaluation or epidemiologist? Excellent question. It is not necessary. I'll give you the short answer. It is not necessary to have either. It's not a mandatory part of the application. Is there a max amount allowed for travel or trainings? If there is no max amount allowed for travel or trainings. I always recommend that grantees appropriate between $2,500 and $5,000 for training. That will give you a lot of cushion for a 3-year project. You probably will not go over $5,000, but I'm also basing that on the amount of OJJDP recommended travel and training opportunities. If you are developing your own TA, which may require your own training and your own travel budget, then you'll want to also consider those elements as well. But I usually tell grantees between $2,500 and $5,000, and you probably will not go over $5,000. Are any costs unallowable? Yeah, there are a lot of costs that are unallowable. Construction is unallowable. Meals are unallowable. Purchasing cars is unallowable. I would refer you to the DOJ Financial Guide, which talks a lot about allowable costs and what's disallowed. If you were awarded an award for the opioid initiative, can you apply for this funding? Yes. If you can demonstrate that you have the capacity, the staffing to do it, and that this particular funding is going to be altogether different from what you were actively awarded or previously awarded under this initiative, you can certainly apply. It doesn't preclude you. Is the deadline still April 20th? Yeah, so that's a really good question, given that we're dealing with COVID-19. At this time, the deadline is still April 20th. We're continuing, though, to assess the situation, and we'll continue to monitor things, and a determination may or may not be made to adjust the closing date. But for now, it's still April 20th. I would really encourage you, though, to keep checking our website like every week just to see if that deadline has changed. But as of now, it hasn't. How would you describe the differences between this solicitation and the mentoring youth impacted by opioids? So I don't manage mentoring youth, so I'm unfamiliar. I don't have enough expertise in that particular solicitation to talk about the differences. I would just invite you to read both solicitations and find out where you see similarities and where you see differences. Can bio sketches be submitted instead of resumes? Yes. But I would just call it, I would label the file key personnel, and you might want to, because we're typically accustomed to reviewing resumes, I would just include, a couple of sentences that, we've opted to do bio sketches instead of resumes, and it would be perfectly fine. But again, I wouldn't label the file name bio sketches. I would keep it key personnel. If we received a $750,000 grant, would we have to spend $250 per year, or could we spend it? You can spend it as needed over the last 3 years. You'll work with me, your grant manager, to make sure that the budget is reasonable, that it's doable. But however you want to, if you were awarded the $750,000, however you want to appropriate that over 3 years in a way that makes sense for your programming is fine. Family-based services where youth are included is certainly allowed. This is an initiative for family and children, and so we encourage programming that supports both demographics. If you are servicing a high-priority area and a client moves outside of that area, yes, you can still continue to provide services to that client. Is there a minimum number of youth that need to be served There is no ideal number. There's no minimum number. I would say be very realistic with your numbers. Sometimes grantees are very ambitious, and they find out that halfway through the grant they can't meet their targets. So I would say you certainly want targets that are reasonable and that are doable and that really allow you to provide quality, effective programming. It's more about the quality than the quantity, so to speak. So, but however that number comes to be is certainly up to you, and I imagine would be determined by your needs assessment and your strategic partnerships within the community and how many referrals you can reasonably get. Are the programs responsible for all-encompassing array of opioid services? So you develop your own programming based upon the needs in your local community. So we are not prescribing what programs and what services you have to encompass. It's going to be different for everyone, and it's going to be based on the needs assessment that you'll be conducting, because that's going to tell you what your community needs. Your partnerships, your community stakeholders are going to tell you what you guys need. And then you'll develop your proposal based upon that community assessment. And because it's only a 3-year grant, you can't do everything. So you want to just really be targeted into what you can do and do well and make sure that it's something you've identified that is really responsive to the need. It might be just a couple of services versus trying to like kind of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Because we can tell when we are talking to through TA assessments, through in-person assessments, through monitoring, through calls, through federal reporting that you'll have to do, we can tell whether this is a project that's really meaningful in terms of what it's trying to accomplish and whether the grantee is just kind of grasping at straws and seeing what sticks. Can a lead nonprofit apply? I would refer you back to the eligibility requirements for the question, can a lead nonprofit apply on behalf of organizations in multi-states? So I would refer you back to the eligibility requirements, and this is kind of similar to the question I had earlier. So if you are applying for multi-states, just know that you are beholden to the federal program requirements and audit assessments, because you'll be listed on the application even though you might be handing over the work to those organizations in multi-states. It's really, you're really entering a partnership. It's almost like if we went to the car dealership and I co-signed for the car that you'll be driving, you'll be managing, you'll be taken care of, but my name is on the car loan. So I'm ultimately responsible. So I have to make sure as the signer that I have the capacity, should something happen, to assume responsibility 100% for that vehicle. Can prevention services target youth who have not yet been identified? Yeah, so this is, we support prevention and intervention strategies. Gateway drugs as marijuana. So it's a really good question. I'll read the question. Can prevention services target youth who have not yet been identified with confirmed unprescribed use of opioids, but either are a confirmed user of gateway drugs or have a family member? Yes, I would say yes. Preventative mechanisms are certainly encouraged as well. I always would be looking for what is the early risk tool that you're utilizing to make sure that you've targeted someone who is truly at risk for opioids. So as long as you have a mechanism built in place that detects risk areas, then you can certainly develop programming around prevention versus intervention. Are our programs responsible for an all-encompassing array of opioid services? So this is, I think I've responded to this question previously. You want to build out your program in a way that makes sense for your area and your demographic, and so you'll be the one determining what services you want to focus on. We don't have a mandate or a requirement in place that says, here's a checklist of all the services that you have to encompass. We don't have anything like that. We're just looking for really strong narratives that respond to the problem. Should I read into the goals and or in the place of the semicolon? I think, let's see. Are we to meet each of these objectives? So you don't have to meet each one of the objectives. You just want to focus on the ones that are applicable to you. Does the program have to provide direct treatment? No. Can the lead organization, can the lead nonprofit apply? So I responded to that one before. I would check your eligibility, number one, and ensure that as you are applying on behalf of, that you have the capacity to sustain the grant, even though they'll be the ones administering the program. The language is kind of misleading for eligibility. Eligible applicants that propose to provide direct services to youth must not include youth who are 18 or older in the population they serve. Can you explain this further? It seems very straightforward to me, but I certainly understand that I may have federal government brain. So I would say if you could please reword your question in a very explicit way, like what is it about that statement that you need more clarity on? Because it seems very straightforward to me. You can't provide direct services to youth who are over 18 in your population. So, but please let me know if you have a question or need clarity about that. So there's another question that I'm not clear about. What would be the objective? Again, could you please explain? I don't know. I need a little bit more context for that one. The next question, can a grant-funded intervention be directed to parents with opioid use disorder? Yes. It's opioid children and families, so you can certainly include families in that. Just for clarification on the performance measures, is it correct to state that we will include the performance measures that we plan to track? And if we are awarded, you will advise as to how we are to report the measures? Sure, yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. That's excellent. Report, state in your application the measures that you plan to track, which is fantastic. Everyone doesn't do that. That's very helpful. And if you're awarded, yeah, there's going to be training, there's going to be webinars. We'll work with you just to make sure that you are reporting accurately and that you're able to access the system where the reporting takes place. So your statement is fully correct. Can the program include community-based partners to provide services? Absolutely. Yep, we encourage community-based partnerships. Given the COVID pandemic, what is the likelihood that this funding will in fact be co-opted to deal with our national emergency? That's an excellent, excellent question. I just don't think that we've gotten there yet. I certainly haven't seen any official guidance about funding in view of COVID-19. So I would say stay tuned. Please continue to check our website often for updates. You know, I think we can all agree as a nation kind of going through this that messages are changing every day about this pandemic. So I would say check our website for any updates related to COVID-19. Follow us on social media if you check your Twitter account or YouTube or Facebook, and any updates regarding that will come through those channels. if meals are not allowed, does that include providing refreshments for participants? So meals are just not allowable. This is not allowable. The only way that a meal can be allowed is if, the consumption of it is necessary for the teaching and the training that's going forth. That probably will never apply to program email. It probably might only apply to if you're having a conference or an event. But these conversations are really pertinent for grantees. So as an applicant putting together an application, if you feel very strongly about the meals, put them in your budget. Put them in your budget. Because what will happen is if you have a strong narrative and your proposal is competitive, that's not going to stop you from getting awarded. What will happen, though, is after we make the award, we'll call you and say, congratulations, you've gotten the award. Your narrative was strong enough. Your data and your assessment was strong enough. You got the award. Now let's talk about this budget. And we'll change it. We'll modify it. We'll talk through the budget. We'll say, you can do all of what you're proposing in the budget, but you have to take the meals out. So don't think that including meals as an applicant will hurt your chances of getting funded. It doesn't. It doesn't. I think it's good to not include them because you know that they're not allowed. But I've had grantees, who've done it both ways. I've had grantees who've included meals and felt strongly about it. And I've had grantees who didn't include meals. They were both awarded a really robust, I think some static, William. I don't know if I hope that you guys are hearing me.
Yeah, I hear it as well. And then maybe I'm checking our levels right now, Kathy, just to confirm and see what it may be. Could be a little bit of breaking up of the line. Let's give it just a really quick second, Kathy. If you're on speaker, Kathy, would you mind switching to handheld as well? And let's see if that changes anything.
Okay, yeah, sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, and it looks like that did get rid of the interruption there. Again, apologies to the audience. We do, because of high usage at the current time, are experiencing some intermittent interruptions, but it looks like it's a leave now. So we're looking good. And Kathy, you have about 10 more minutes for questions, but we're good to go.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks so much, William. So we have a few more minutes, and just to close out the meals question, I've had grantees who've done both, who've included the meals in the budget, and once they got the award, we worked with them to modify those changes in the budget. And then I've had grantees who haven't included meals in the budget, were able to get the award, and then throughout the course of them implementing the project, the question came up again. So that's really something you want to work with your grant manager about, and it typically happens after you've gotten the award. Just for clarification, is the Parents Initiative whose children are active addiction a consideration? So I don't know what you mean by Parents Initiative. You want to propose projects that are geared toward children, youth, and families. So you want to kind of stick with the theme of the solicitation. If you have a parents initiative where it's evident that the focal point are the parents, I would just really work through that in your conversation and work through that in your narrative and just be mindful that we are the Juvenile Justice Initiative. We are the OJJDP Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and so the peer reviewers who will be reviewing your applications are already aware that everything we do is child-focused. It's not child-focused isolating the parent, but it's child focused, including the parents versus we're going to do parents initiative and just kind of work with kids. You want to really make sure as you're languaging your initiatives that kids are front and center. Does the term persistent poverty county also include cities that meet the specified targets? When targeting to serve youth of a specific city with an overall poverty rate, can we serve the whole city? I think you can serve what looks best for your project. So you'll be the one selecting your own demographic, and you'll be building your proposal around that. So we're not prescriptive in terms of who you should be serving versus the high poverty census and what demographic. We really put a lot of that leniency and flexibility on the grantees. And I know it might seem kind of loosey-goosey, but we really are getting away from being prescriptive in our funding. We just want to see good proposals. We want to make sure that you are capturing the need and that you've settled on a demographic in a poverty area that makes sense for you. In terms of the census tracts, I would just put that data in your narrative and make sure that you can really substantiate it. So these, I think, are the last two questions. Would it be acceptable to combine prevention and recovery services? Yes, that would be acceptable. Can you summarize policy around working with pregnant and postpartum people? So I've gotten this question before, and I've answered it. So I would suggest that you go back to, I think I got this question in my email yesterday. So there's an answer that's going to be funneled through the response center. We got this specific answer about pregnant women, pregnant youth, and postpartum. So I would refer you back to the response center. That answer will be circulating there. And then we addressed it earlier on in the questions. So I see one last question that just came through. Is it acceptable to use zip codes instead of census tracts for your poverty analysis? That's a really, really good question. I don't have the best answer for you at this particular time, but I would really invite you to take that question, email it at the response center, because what's going to happen is they usually will email me, and then I can kind of do some background research and get you the best answer possible for that particular question. So I would refer you to our response center, so it'll funnel its way through me, and I can kind of think through the best response. So that's all the questions that we have. Thank you guys for joining the webinar today. I hope that you found it informative. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact us at our response center. If you're curious about any sort of changes or updates as it relates to COVID-19, please check our website daily or perhaps weekly. We'll be putting any updates on that platform. Thank you all and have a wonderful weekend. William, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you to our audience members for bearing with us. Again, it's a high frequency time and high usage time for a lot of virtual platforms and conference calls, so we do appreciate you all bearing with us with a few of our audio issues. But nonetheless, this webinar is being recorded and, again, will be available for viewing in a few days. But let me go over a few announcements with you all. Again, thanks, Kathy, for a great presentation. Before we wrap up, these reminders, please, if you get a chance, please be sure to stay in contact with us at OJJDP InTech. Here you can see where we have our listserv information, as well as a way you can sign up for our listserv to know about our latest webinars that we offer, including ones like this. Also, be sure to check us out on Facebook at OJJDP TTA. If you would like to get in contact with the OJJDP Help Desk or with OJJDP, you may do so through the Help Desk. Please feel free to contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk at the contact information on this slide. Do you have a training or technical assistance need? Well, if so, please be sure to submit a request via the OJJDP TTA 360 platform. Accessing the platform can be done so through the URL on this slide. And again, as I mentioned earlier, please note that our webinars will be archived on our YouTube page. You may access the YouTube page through the URLs on this slide. For any supporting materials, you may contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk at this email address and contact information on this slide. Please note that we do have a few upcoming events coming up on the 25th and on the 26th. Each of these events will be hosted by yours truly with OJJDP's Intact. Please feel free to click on the link where you can learn more. Also, feel free to click on the Register Now button here and in the PowerPoint slides located in the handouts so you can register for our upcoming webinars. Again, we have a grant solicitation coming up for next week, as well as a couple of other webinars that we have set in April and in May that are focused on cyberbullying and focused on legal representation for families affected by substance use disorders. Very helpful and informative webinars that we have coming up. So feel free to, again, learn more about those webinars here by clicking on those links, and also feel free to register for those webinars as you see fit. Now, I will leave you all with one last poll question that I have for you all. What I want to know is, how do you plan to apply the information from this webinar to your work? As you can see, we have multiple options here. You can feel free to select multiple options, meaning more than one. So if any of these apply to this particular question for you specifically, how you plan to